5 to 10.
5 to 10 years.
And looking at like what technology to use, is that what you're saying? Like
You can pick
Twitters to
you can pick a technology for now, but just be prepared to dump it in about a year. This isn't like choosing someone you're going to marry. This is like more like about choosing someone that you're going to go out with for a little while.
One of the points too, when you mentioned too, is like how often and what do you say. I think the idea too is like, think of it as a conversation, no matter what. And like, you don't want to. I mean, if you're spamming me on Twitter all the time, you're gone, right? Or if you're consistently just pouring out, buy my book, do this or that, you're gone. But if you're interacting, if you're bringing links to me or something of that nature that might be relevant or it's engaging or somehow ties back to your brand, I'll look at that, right? So I look at it as a conversation. That's the way I look at it too when I look at messaging. I go, we now have the ability to interact on a one-on-one level across several million people.
If you need a metric though for how often you should communicate with your customers, just take a look at how many customer emails you're getting per day. Let's say you're getting 100 customer emails a day. Maybe you should do 5 or 10 pieces of content. There should be some sort of ratio based on the number of inbound feedbacks that you get to how many outbound sort of feedbacks you should give.
And I think that needs to be capped. I remember I started following Gavin Newsom at some point last year, and I checked my Twitter feed on a Saturday morning, and it was just Gavin Newsom replying to everybody who had written him a message on Twitter, which was a major faux pas. Do not do that. If you want to interact with somebody, you can write, do your replies when it's really relevant for everybody, but not. Remember that on Twitter, everyone can see what you're doing, so you want to keep that.
And I even goofed on that today. I replied to you, and I should, or no, I sent you, I guess, a direct message. But there have been times where even, the best of us will make a it's because it's such an immediate medium that sometimes it'll be like, oh, whoops, I just gave away the company secret, delete. But that's the other thing about Twitter. It's permanent. I mean, if you don't want it like on a billboard on 101 in Redwood City, then don't put it on Twitter.
It's not just Twitter, but anything you put online, just assume that it's there for good. There's nothing you can do. He also brought up a very interesting point, which is that it's about a conversation regardless of the medium. So right now, we're all having a conversation inside this building, but this conversation could easily move to Moscone Center. It could easily move to one of our apartments, and we would be having the same conversation. And the same way with social media. Right now, we may be having this conversation on Twitter, but it could easily move next year to Facebook. It could easily move the year after that to some random startup that just came up out of nowhere. So keep in mind it's the content and the subject of what you're talking about as opposed to the medium that you're actually communicating with people.
And when people ask why do these tools die or what makes them fade, it's not always unpopularity. Sometimes it's motivated by financial interests. There's a really, really good PR pro I know. His name's Neil Weinberg. He runs Weinberg Communications. He did an amazing job working with this company called Jaiku, and they were a great microblog. They were Twitter's #2 competitor, and they were neck and neck for about 9 or 10 months. He did so good that they were purchased by Google. Brought them in, they said, we're going to develop it. And then Google put the product on hold.
And now nobody knows about it.
Now it's on an indefinite hold. And it's sort of like, they're just sort of waiting outside by like a bus station in the middle of South Dakota, and the product's just languishing. So sometimes tools may perish for the wrong reasons even, but if you sort of, put all your infrastructure into this one tool, you might get stuck. So you really got to kind of hedge your bets a little bit.
And then, so we've crafted the social, you guys have got home, tomorrow you craft your first social media strategy. You guys are getting into the research aspect. 90 days later, what key performance indicators should everyone use to gauge success?
I have one that I love it. It's called social number. And I read it with capital S, social, capital N, number. It's a pretty cool metric. You need to use Google Analytics or maybe Omniture or some analytics program to get it. And so the way you find it, you have to dig a little bit. You'll need a spreadsheet to figure it out. You look at all the referral traffic that's coming into your website, and you figure out, out of all the referral traffic, you can pick like the top 25 referrers or maybe the top 50 referrers. So these are the people who are sending you traffic. So maybe it's Facebook, maybe it's Twitter, maybe Google.com. And then you whitelist all the ones that are from the social internet. And you figure out what percentage of your referral traffic is coming from the social internet. So I did it today on my own site, actually. I don't have that much traffic on my website. I think it's something like about 1,100 visits per month. So that's like 30 odd visits per day or so. But it turns out that 80% of my referral traffic comes from Facebook, Twitter, MySpace, social media entities, blogs, things like that. So that means my social number is 80. And so then I looked at one of my clients, it was a boat company, and their social number is 1, meaning only 1% of their referral traffic comes from the social web. So when you first start out, your social numbers can be real low. It'll be like 1 or 2, meaning 1% of your referral traffic is coming from the social web, or 2%. But over that first month or those first 3 months, maybe you'll want to go from like 1 to 10. And if you go from 1 to 10, that is awesome. That's a tenfold increase. You will be, even if you go from 1% to 5%, that is great. So just go for these like little incremental gains. And after a year or two, yeah, sure, you want to get that up to 40 or 50. You go beyond 60, like that's really great.
I think, Adam really raises a great point too. I mean, you don't look at this as like, this is not going to be an overnight smash, right? And you look at, I know Seth Godin did a great post a couple years ago. It's like, it takes about 2 to 3 years for your blog to really get traffic. I mean, you've got to love what you're doing, and you've got to love interacting and having these conversations, and want to have it on a regular basis. Like if you look at Zappos, right, and Tony, and I mean the guys,
We haven't even talked about Zappos.
but they love it. They love this aspect. I mean, I went to this party where it's like, if you go to Majul and write Zappos on Twitter, if you write Zappos on your left hand in red ink, you get free drinks all night. So everyone's walking around wine doing this all night, and it's that you love your job, you love interacting, you love talking to people and creating these communities, if you will.
I'm sorry, on
Yeah.
that note, just as
Yeah.
totally off topic from what we were just talking about, but Luna Park and the mission, if you follow them on Twitter, they're doing similar deals, and for local companies, this is a really cool thing. There's like 300 people following them on Twitter, but they'll say you get 50% off on Wednesday night if you wear a hat, only for Twitter followers. And it's just like, I want to follow Luna Park. Everything that comes off of that feed, I follow, because I know I'm going to get free food because of it. And I think there is something to be said with, like, you don't want to give things away in social media, but on Twitter, I think if you can give, like, little inside deal giveaways, is definitely okay.
It'd be so funny to like come in and just see like everyone like at big tables of 6 and 7 people, and everyone's like wearing baseball hats.
That's
I'm
what it's like.
what is this?
So I had another question. What tools are people using to consume communications on Twitter? Are they just logging into Twitter and looking at their page? Because suppose I subscribe to Luna Park and 30 other local restaurants, and 30 other or 20 other boutiques in my neighborhood. How am I going to actually organize and consume all that in a meaningful way?
Yeah, you don't want 30 text messages. There's a lot of different clients. You kind of got to ask yourself, well, what do I sit in front of most of the day? And so if you're out and about, I'd say maybe an iPhone or a BlackBerry client like Twitterberry or Tweety is really nice on the iPhone. $2. It's a real good program. TweetDeck, if you're kind of chained to your laptop all day, I love TweetDeck. You can do really funky feeds too on TweetDeck.
TweetDeck is more for the power user though, so if you're not a huge power user, there are a couple others on the Mac and on the PC too that are just as good. And honestly, if you just go to Google and type in Twitter client, 80% of Twitter's traffic comes through their API. And by API, I mean anybody who's actually built a client on top of Twitter's infrastructure.
We should talk a little bit for a second about what an API is, because that's a really, really critical word to know. API, it's Application Programming Interface, and it's sort of the spinal cord of like any particular social or software platform, really. So whenever your brand sees some cool software like Twitter or Facebook, you kind of want to look and say like, do these guys have an API? Meaning, do they have a way that I can like grab their data and do cool stuff with it? Because Facebook sure has an API. It's a really powerful one. Google has one. In fact, Google Analytics launched their API today, so you can do all kinds of fun tricks with it. And same with Twitter. So like, you can actually get inside of the core of Twitter and like do fun programming stuff with it and really manipulate the data to your own purposes. And so, for example, Google Search actually released their API, so you could do cool stuff with it. And then they said, nah, we don't think we want to do this, and they rescinded it. So right now in the world of search, there's only one API that you can actually mine and do cool stuff with, and that's Yahoo. And
So how does that work now? Yeah.
so like, let's say you wanted to make a custom search engine just for your brand. You could actually like go and get the core code base of Yahoo. Let's say you had one computer programmer on your staff, and you could work with them. There's actually really good documentation on how to use it. So the reason you would use an API is to connect their data to your data at a very core level. So let's say you had a customer database and you wanted to get more information about your customers, you could use an API to do that. So whenever you start doing business with another computer company or a search company or a social network, you might want to ask them like, tell me a little bit about your API. What does it do? Could it help me? And in the end, no, it can't, but it's always worth spending 5 minutes to asking the question.
Everybody and their mother's coming out with an API right now. So, Twitter has one. Like you said, Google used to have one for their search. Yahoo has several. Yahoo's actually probably one of the most forward-thinking companies when it comes to the APIs that they have out there.
They're like Rodney Dangerfield. They really are. They try so hard.
They do
They
try
just
so
don't
hard.
get enough respect.
Yeah. You know, but APIs are really